Welcome to the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio. Keenan Lake is the author of the book My Daddy Taught Me That, published by Welcome, a social worker and activist. You can like this show's fan page at www.facebook.com/The Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio. Feel free to post any comments, questions, or requests for his book on the fan page. Now let's go into the studio with your host, Mr. Keenan Lake, and co-host, Marcus Select.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of the Keenan Lake Show, live and on demand on SIBN Radio. Keenan, how are you doing today?
Coach Marcus Select, I am doing well. Another beautiful day. The sun is shining. We're starting to get into the full swing of spring, trying to get rid of that cold weather. So I'm doing well. How are things in Atlanta?
Great. And introduce your new guest.
Well, Coach, we have on the line Mr. Lucian Stewart. And Mr. Stewart has been really inspirational in helping me with the My Daddy Taught Me That. He's been coming out supporting the youth program and just showing male presence, showing his appreciation about what we're doing with the My Daddy Taught Me That program. Mr. Stewart, are you on the line?
I am, thank you.
Yes, sir. If you'll give a brief introduction, because you've done so much, I don't want to leave anything out. So if you'll give a brief introduction for our audience about what you do and a little bit about where you come from.
Oh, I appreciate that, Keenan. My name is Lucian Stewart. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I've been here in Asheville for about 6 years now. I do work in the area of life coaching, and specifically I focus on helping people overcome fears in the area of public speaking. I have a 24-year history and background with Toastmasters International, and primarily that is the bigger part of the work I do involves communication and helping people with that, but I'm especially interested in helping young people improve their communication skills also.
That is wonderful. So Coach, trying to get started with the program today, I hear some kind of feedback. I'm not sure if that's on my end, Coach.
Yeah, I hear it too. It's not on my end, and we're going to have a sound check here in a little bit, but the topic for today, Keenan, you had a great topic, how racism still affects and divides us.
That's exactly right, Coach. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this today was generally because a situation took place that happened to me over this past week. And actually, I'm having a little difficulty. I don't know if that's on my end. I don't think it's my end.
All right, everybody's on a stationary phone?
Yes. Yeah, there it is. Okay, this is kind of going now. But yeah, so getting back to it, Coach, a situation happened to me over this past week, and it just made me think about this whole racism thing. So what ended up taking place, pretty much most of the time when I'm not working or when I have free time where I'm just dressing leisurely, I try to wear a My Daddy Taught Me That t-shirt or a sweatshirt or something that kind of represents the program. The reason being is because for the most part, whenever I go somewhere, people always say, oh my gosh, I love the shirt, I love the message, tell me more about it. And it gives me an opportunity, it creates a platform for me to talk about the program and kind of create awareness about the program and what all I'm doing with the My Daddy Taught Me That program. So the same thing happened this past week. I was actually meeting a person at a store, and I don't want to say the store's name to create any kind of negative publicity or negative feedback. But anyway, I was at the store meeting a person, and when I left the store, the manager of the store, commented about the shirt. So I said, well, thank you for, asking, let me explain the shirt to you. So during the time when I was explaining about the program, My Daddy Taught Me That program and the youth development part of the program, he asked me, he said, do you really think it's really a problem for the youth out there? So I said, oh, you have no idea. I went on and talked about how, the youth are faced with so many more challenges, even than that of my own, teen years and adolescent years and stuff like that, my young adulthood. And then I talked about some of the hurdles that the youth have to go through, some of the, the things that's dealing with, the lack of male positive role models and absent fathers in the home. So At this time, then the security guard came over and he said, I've seen you before. He said, I've seen you around before, and, every time I see you, you have a really pleasant look about you, but a lot of people always say hello to you. So I said, well, I'm actually from this area, born and raised, and, so we actually had a discussion, and during the discussion, you could kind of tell where they were coming from. So the manager asked me about Obama. He was asking me how I felt about Obama at the time, and he gave me his insight on what he thought about Obama. But to make the story kind of short, so we can get into the meat of the program, while talking about the program, My Daddy Taught Me That program, the security guard, he kind of said, he said, I'm born and raised here in Asheville too. In fact, I'm born and raised in Black Mountain, Swananoa Park. He said, I know, he said, when you talk about youth and young adults and stuff like that, he said, I kind of wish that things can kind of go back to the good old days. Those were his exact words. He said, the good old days. He said, when the blacks and the whites, we played together, we did this together. He said, I'm from Black Mountain, Swananoa. He said, and no offense, but before I say that, let me just say this. Leading up to that, I was giving out statistics about my book, about certain things and stuff like that. So he interjected twice throughout the conversation that you're very smart. You're very insightful. You have a lot of knowledge. So I was like, well, no, I'm just a common dude. I just read a little bit. So he said it a couple times about how smart I was. But then when he was telling me about the good old days, he said, the blacks used to come to his side of town to play. He said, and no offense, but they came from Nigger Hill. He said, he said, you know what Nigger Hill is, don't you? So I said, I've been living in Nashville, pretty much my whole life. I'm born and raised here. I said, and I've never heard of that. And I said, that probably was a time when, that was probably a time when they called it that. I said, but they kind of know better than to use that word these days. So, it just kind of let me believe. And the way I took it, you guys can tell me if I was wrong, but the way I took it was that he was saying, you're smart, but you're still a nigga. You need to stay in your place. Sort of that kind of route. Coach, Mr. Stewart, I'm gonna let one of you guys elaborate on that whole situation.
I'll let Mr. Stewart take that one right there, because that's a big one right there, Kenny.
Well, I appreciate that, Coach. Thank you. I have to say I've had that same experience in my life and on more than one occasion. And having grown up in Houston, Texas, prior to desegregation, this story that you're talking about, I understand and I see this more so, 40 years, 30, 40, 50 years from where we came from with the civil rights movement. And, I thought about this as you asked about it earlier, and I realized that racism, we need to really stop and look at it. We have a lot of talk about it, but we don't really look at what it is. And when we bring it down to just being something that people have against other people because of their skin color, we're ignoring the fact that this is something that's given to children when they're young. And they grow up in a system that supports it, so in their minds, it's invisible. He didn't think twice about talking about when they came from Nigger Hill to play, because that was what it was called. And so he's still walking around in that state of mind. I can't be angry at that. He didn't teach himself that. It was given to him, and nothing until you, Mr. Lake, came to his attention that was not the way we looked at it or the way we felt about it. And I think, when people look back at it, we look at racism from across a line and we see it from two different sides of that line, from the inside, experiencing it, and from the outside, perpetrating it and carrying it on down generations.
Very well said. It's been a while for me since I've had that experience outright. But sometimes I'm wondering, Keenan, whether or not we have given folks a license to regress back to the way things were by our use of the word. I'm just saying. We have, Keenan, as you have always shared on this show, we have failed to kind of like take responsibility for our own actions. And you hear it, bleeped in the songs now, because I try to keep up with my young cats, and I notice that they're using it more in the songs. So Keenan, I think it was a totally disrespectful thing for him to say that. And I think that there is a small percentage of people out there who still think in that way. But
and go ahead, Coach.
No, like the kids say, but it make you feel some kind of way.
Well, this is the thing, and this, like I said, I can't remember, when he said it the first time, I kind of blinked. And in my mind, I said, I know this man didn't just say,
Okay.
It's like, I know he just didn't say what I thought he said. And then he said, and then he said it again. So I said, he said it twice. Like, okay. So, it kind of took me aback. It kind of took me aback when he said it. But then it was like, how do I respond? And I said, well, no, obviously this is ignorant. Obviously this is something that someone who doesn't know any better, or who does know some better. He's just trying to, maybe exercise what he feels is his right of dominance or whatever, whatever they feel. I don't know. But, this is the thing. It's never, on the Keenan Lake Show, it's never about them versus us or black versus white or anything like that. Because I never want the show to be about that, because it's not about that. But however, it's like Coach and Mr. Stewart, also one of the things that they said, which kind of made me elaborate to this topic more, was that, they were talking about how things are not going to get better and how society is kind of, this was coming from the manager's standpoint of it. He was saying that he felt that society has kind of gone too far. That, yeah, can you hear me better now, Coach?
Yeah, but you're just a little faded there. So make sure you're speaking right to your mic.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was saying was that the manager, what they were saying was that they noticed certain things in the store, and they kind of commented on how they made a comment about how certain people who have certain lifestyles can't afford to eat, but they made a comment to public assistance and food stamps, how they can tell, those who are receiving food stamps and this and the third. So they actually kind of made me believe that they were specifically talking about a specific race. And so with that, it just kind of makes me feel like, that we still have a lot to go.
We have a long way to go. I think you just stated the obvious, and you just stated how far we have to go. These racist overtones, as they would say politically, are there in our political world even more bluntly, it seems, in the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, really bluntly. I mean, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more experiences like this. Stuart?
Real quick, Coach, you're kind of hard to hear, too, at this point in time, and I know it was a lot of... Mr. Stewart, maybe, are you by a fan, or anybody by a fan or anything like that?
No, I'm clear of all objects with sound around me, so no fan.
No fan. No. This is some kind of interference that I'm hearing on my end. Coach, I'm not sure if you can hear it on your end as well at all.
Yeah, it's coming from what kind of one of the contact phones? Because Keenan, when Stuart comes in, you kind of fade out a little bit, and Stuart is real clear. So, but we'll troubleshoot a little bit more during the commercial break. But yeah, as I was saying, politically speaking, these overtones are out front. I mean, food stamp president, for example, the 47%, is another example of that. So, Stuart, I mean, what do you say? It sounds like we're slowly regressing and returning, I don't know, back to some of the good old days where they could say and almost do anything and not being challenged, especially when you have, pardon me, the portion of the Civil Rights Act that was struck down by the Supreme Court. We've seen a real fast pace of racist laws being passed, as Keenan and I discussed on the previous show. So, Stuart, what you think?
Well, and it's interesting that you speak of it that way, when just recently Mississippi has released a lot of information that they were collecting on people during the Civil Rights Movement. And when I sit there watching that information a little stunned, because here they had all that time, they were clearly doing stuff to prevent black people from voting. I happen to remember growing up, and my grandparents in Houston were taking the literacy test in order to vote. So I have, as part of my own life history, a remembrance of the very things that I see coming out now in the media, in terms of things that have been hidden and suppressed. Now, it's one thing for us to talk about racism and assume that you're just looking at something in the way people act, but if we go back to those good old days and look at the numbers of people that were in the Klan, now when you see them with sheets over their heads, you need to go back and think about, when they pull those sheets off, where are they located in our society and in our culture? So it's one thing to see racism when it's overt and in your face, and they're lynching and hanging black people left and right with sheets on their head. But when the sheets come off, the only way to see it is we're going to have to realize that it was about what was underneath the sheets the whole time. And now we're looking at the same game. It just simply doesn't have the sheets on it.
Yeah, and then the young kids have no clue that this still exists. I don't think. Keenan, what you think?
Well, Coach, I think that Mr. Stewart made a very, very great point. And following up, I would like to talk about this a little bit more after the commercial break. I know we got to take a commercial. Mm-hmm. So when we come back, Coach, I will dive into this and give my opinion on the topic at hand. All right,
and you're sounding a lot better, Kenan. I think it was that gravy and that steak that you had for dinner. You guys are listening to the Keenan Lake Show. Stand by. We'll have more how racism still affects and divides us. This is the Keenan Lake Show, live and on demand on SIBN Radio.
We trust that you are enjoying the show. Stay right there. We'll be right back after these messages.
To the sounds of your lifestyle improvement station.
Hi, Jamaica Chapel, College Park, Georgia, in the house. You're listening to SIBN Radio.
Hi, this is Ted Bones calling from Richmond, Virginia, and you're listening to the Lifestyle Improvement Station, SIBN Radio. Y'all turn it up now.
Hi, this is VJ Washington calling from Atlanta, Georgia. You're listening to the Lifestyle Improvement Station, SIBN Radio. So turn it up.
Hi, my name is Sonia Claiborne from East St. Louis, Illinois, by way of Carruthersville, Missouri. You're listening to the Lifestyle Improvement Station, SIBN Radio. Turn it up.
What's good? It's your boy Joe coming from Snellville, Georgia. You're listening to the Lifestyle Improvement Station, SIBN Radio. Y'all turn it up.
You're listening to the sounds of your lifestyle improvement station, changing the way we live. SIBN FM, powered by Select USA TV. Responsible. Accountable. Who taught you that? My daddy taught me that. That's right, the new book all the way from Asheville, North Carolina, representing the legacy of Benny Lake is Keenan Lake, the author of My Daddy Taught Me That, the book and the program for young men in Asheville, North Carolina and throughout the region. Tune in to the program, the project, and the book at MyDaddyTaughtMeThat.com. For more information, email lake@MyDaddyTaughtMeThat.com or call 828-582-2261. That's 828-582-2261. MyDaddyTaughtMeThat.com.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Keenan Lake Show right here on SIBN Radio, all the way from Asheville, North Carolina. Mr. Keenan Lake and our special guest on today as we discuss how racism still affects and divides us. Keenan?
Coach, I think to answer the question at hand, Coach, we're getting back to the show, Mr. Stewart made a very elegant point when he's talked about the racism is still there. It's just it's a different. It's still there. It's just under a different disguise under a different hat, you know. So to answer your question, Coach, when you talked about the youth, I think you're absolutely right as well. You know, it's a situation now where, you know, it's not blatant racism in your face where you're being, you know, persecuted or, you know, called names or being subjected to some type of form of punishment directly in your face. But I think it's going behind the curtains. I think that it's still things that goes on, and I think that, you know, when you talk about the youth, first of all, I don't think, you know, when you talk about the youth, you got to talk about history as well. And as we know, you know, history is not being taught very well anyway. But then, you know, you could always talk about the learning and stuff like that. So, and then you just look at, you know, I talked to a 12-year-old young man a couple of months back, and, you know, I was talking about Dr. King, and he was like, well, you know, who was Dr. King? You know, and this was so it's like, are you serious? Like, really, seriously? But so, you know, I don't think the plight and history of what had took place is really important to the youth as much. You know, they never had to really suffer and go through certain things, and even me myself. You know, I never was. You know, my dad was born, you know, and had to be subjected to segregation and, you know, going to different bathrooms and going to, you know, different water fountains and stuff like that. He literally had to go through that. I didn't. So, you know, that to him was so much more, you know, a part of his life and something that he had to deal with, whereas it wasn't for me. So even moving forward, Coach, I don't think the youth really understand. So I think there's things that can definitely be done behind the curtain that will definitely affect them that they won't be subjected to or even know that's going on.
I kind of think that the racism is blunt myself because it seems like we've been appeased to accept the status quo, and that new status quo is you got your music, you got your food stamps, you got public school systems that are underfunded. You've got you've got private schools. Don't touch our charter schools. And you've got black representation to a certain degree. I think it's blunted in the face. It's just in a different stroke. It's a different type of smack. It's a different type of punch. It's a punch with brass knuckles, I kind of think. And the sad part about it is that today's racism is more poisonous than all of history, in my view, because the new slave tactic is give them what they want, but not what they need. I don't know. I'm just saying. Stuart?
I have to absolutely agree with you. A few weeks ago when I spoke at Keenan's group, I had come across a saying the day before that said, no man who has knowledge will ever be fit to be a slave. Knowledge is power. I've always heard that. I didn't understand it until as I got older and I look at us as a culture of people. Every other culture that's here in America came here with a source of language, of history, of a number of elements that held them together. Black people didn't have that. And when we look at, in terms of the impact on slavery on our culture, historically speaking, what we're looking at, and especially when we talk about us as a race, we don't have the same cohesive language, culture, and all of the other elements that hold us together, but we're still fighting over the use of the word nigger or the skin tone and everything else. I completely agree with you, and I believe that the correction of this has to start at the level of children, because that's where the big finger is on us right now. You go into any correctional system and look at the ratios, you're going to see it predominantly black. And so this speaks to the fact that you've already put them in a slot that guarantees that from that point forward, unless there's something that intervenes, they are set into a lifestyle that's easily identifiable because the system has created it to be that way. They will need those food stamps. They will be the ones that you see on the news reports. So I completely agree that until we get a hold of what we send out into the world through our children, this is going to just perpetuate itself continuously.
Wow. So let me ask both of you guys this then. So, and I think you touched on it a little bit, Mr. Stewart, here. You know, it's about educating our youth. But if you guys are saying this is directly, because, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, and I think, Mr. Stewart, you made a great point, too, as far as proportionately how the numbers impact us more so than, but I think you can argue that, too, and say, well, the numbers are always going to be more on the minority and the poor, which is, so I guess my question to you two both is this. First of all, if this is something that is really happening and that's going on, which we all can probably say that it is, I use myself as an example really quickly. I've been working for the county for 11 years, as a social worker, and I'm the only African-American male social worker who's been at the agency for 11 years. And that doesn't mean that that's racism. That doesn't mean that that's racism. But it does mean that there's something else going on. Maybe, I don't know. How would you guys say that, and what would be the fix?
Well, I mean, Keenan, before Stewart goes, I want to say first of all that the name Lake still has a threat to it, to the status quo. And that's just my 2 cents on it. But we could look at it in a positive way and say that's representation, because we know that service organizations and nonprofits are looking to have representation for a constituency that poses a constant set of needs. And so you can look at that with the glass half full or half empty, but I still want to say that the name Lake still serves as a name beyond extraordinary. It is a name that doesn't merge well with the status quo of things. So I see it as a representation, but as Stewart said, we have 2 plights. We have the argument, really, that, well, there's not enough college-educated African-American men that could represent their communities. And then we have the other argument that, well, there's a lot of them that could represent their communities, but they've abandoned their communities for greater success in other areas. And then we have the other argument, which is true, that a lot of our young African-American men are not graduated from college with enough education to be able to represent their constituency in any form of life, whether it be role modeling, mentoring, whether it be, a profession, whatever the case may be. But I see it as a positive, really, because, you are exposed to the core of what's really still going on in good times. Stewart?
I agree, and what you just stated is actually a paradox, because I fall into that category. My parents raised me, and at the time, the statement to me was, we don't want you to have to spend your life growing up here. We want you to be able to go out into the world and do something better. Now, mind you, my elementary school years, segregation was still in place, so I went to a segregated elementary school. And then when I hit junior high and integration occurred, that's when changes started happening that they didn't plan on. In the community where I went to school were all of my teachers, and all of the people in the administration were the same people I went to church with, I saw in the grocery store. They had an investment in my future. When integration happened, many of them were moved out, and then came in people who didn't have a shared interest in that investment. And so I began to see at the level within the community a change in things there. Now, when you start talking about improving education levels for black people, you're sending kids out, and once they reach that level, they can't represent the places that they come from because they no longer identify with that, which creates the paradox that we deal with. Many young people, once they grow up and they leave home, in order to function effectively in the system, they have to become part of the system. And without that root in a culture that gives them a sense of identity, being fully integrated, accepting who you are, being the best you are as a black person, not having people look at you and say, oh, you're intelligent for a black person or you're articulate for a black person, but simply acknowledging them as a person. But that's something only the individual can bring that. You can't make people look at you any other way than the way you approach them.
Yeah, well, I think the nature of this show and Keenan Lake's legacy with My Daddy Taught Me That, the book, the program, and all of that, is to bring us to an awareness that we don't need to give any establishment, be it any color, a reason to continue on desiring the good old days. I mean, right
Absolutely.
now, you know, we're giving reason, we're giving fuel to the fire, you know.
Yes.
And of course, by all means, it doesn't help that the spotlight is not shown on good kids and good programs and good churches and good public schools and on and on and on. I mean, that's the paradigm of how we can keep people in their place and keep a element of slavery active by shining the light on only the bad, the ugly, you know, and the turmoil of it all. But that's a cultural issue. That's the Western way to show the worst of the worst, so we can constantly be in fear. But suffice it is to say, as Keenan always says, that we have to take onus of the fact that we're able to change one person at a time, one family at a time, one home at a time.
Wonderful. So, gentlemen, before we start to wrap up the show and, you know, come to a close, there's a question that I want to ask the two of you, and this is probably the hardest question of all. But let me elaborate a little bit about the question first. I have a really good friend by the name of Tyson Bates, and we always talk about stuff, and he calls stuff buffoonery and, you know, stuff like that when issues happen. Primarily, if you want to say black issues.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always said, you know, he's always said, look, I don't fool with them dummies and stuff like that. We make jokes stuff like that. He said, because, you know, black people do dumb stuff just like all races do, but there are certain things that, you know, we do that other races don't. And the thing that I want to ask you two gentlemen is this. Have we, and I think you guys kind of touched a little bit on the topic here today and touched a little bit on this question, but have we become that word that we most ultimately despise with our actions? You know, the stereotypes. You know, the stereotypes are the stereotypes. Black men don't work. You know, we're undereducated. We don't raise our children. You know, those are some of the main stereotypes that we have to face. Black women are loud and obnoxious, and you know, and don't know how to treat the black men. You know, I mean, these are some of the stereotypes, folks. Let me make this clear. These are stereotypes. This is nothing that Keenan Lake is saying on his own. But I want to find. I mean, is this something that we have been subjected to from racism? And do you guys see this as something that we have reduced ourselves to? And then finally, so it's kind of a three-part question. Finally, you know, how do we either overcome these stereotypes or overcome what we have ultimately been led to believe or labeled as?
Well, if I can speak to it first, I would remind us that history is written by the victors. And if we look at the black people in slavery, then the perception and the writing of that history, clearly we were not the victors in that. And as time has gone on, what has happened, at least from my perspective as a black man, I am able to look at this history that's been laid out, covering over all of the things that went on in slavery that shows high intelligence, endurance, and all of the things that we as a race of people did in order to not only survive it, but thrive throughout it, but that we don't see in history that's reduced to the month of February. So I just simply will leave as a reminder that just like history is written by the victor, power is perceived by the person. So if we want to continue to perceive ourselves as powerless, even though we have that history, even though it's not written out for everybody to see it, it's up to us to go in, find it, share it with our young people, and give them a sense of their own identity and not the one that everyone else will want to assign them.
I mean, but it's no secret that you can't change the hearts of the status quo. But what you can do, as you just said, is personally, professionally, on a communal basis, rewrite history. And I think the challenge that, Keenan, you bring to this show and through your book and your program, if I could tie it to that, is that we need to be more cautious of the history we are writing individually that adds to a collective history. We already know that we're swimming uphill. I mean, that's not a secret. We've been swimming uphill since we got here in this country. And I want to remind everybody that's listening that we've not been free that long. I need some help. We have not been free that long. And with freedom comes responsibility. With freedom comes accountability. And with freedom comes a communal exchange. I will give you something back for giving me what I needed to succeed in life. And so the racist card will never go away. There will always be an inkling, a small, very, very small, minute percentage. But unfortunately, as Stuart just says, they have the microphone. We're using the microphone for something else. We're using the microphone for booty calls. We're using the microphone for preaching, about Jesus or whatever. We're using the microphone for everything else but educating our people on how to leave a legacy individually that will add to the collective history that we're writing for the next generation. And as someone so eloquently emailed and commented on the last show, it's very, very important that we don't become so self-centered in our own quest for success that we forget that. And other cultures have not forgotten that. The Asian culture, the Hispanic culture, the Latino culture, the Caucasian culture, Mexican culture, African Americans in general have to remember that we're still writing the history. We haven't been free. I don't know who could get the stats for that, but I don't think we've even been free for 100 years. I'm just saying, right?
No.
So that being said, we are, Keenan, this is going to be a very interesting tagline one day for a show we'll do together. We are yet infants in freedom. We are yet infants in freedom. I dare say we are yet young in the freedom that we have so collectively shared in for the last, I want to say, 75, 80 years. I don't know what that is.
Then we got somebody cutting grass.
Well, that sounds like somebody near my house.
You understand what I'm saying, Keenan? I mean, we haven't been free very long. And so you when you set a people free who didn't realize they were rich before, and they become rich in any capacity now, it's like a child who doesn't look to the village anymore, the father, to distribute those riches appropriately, to invest appropriately, so forth and so on, to ensure that the legacy of how we acquired this freedom collectively is passed on. And so we're all writing a new chapter. Now, whether or not we will blow the whistle and get on the microphone, that's why we're on the microphone. We're saying, hold up. We're not niggers. And if you look the word up, it means low down, dirty, X, Y, and Z. Black people are not that. Black people are not fools. Black people are not food stamp folk. The percentage of folks on food stamps are minorities, are whites in this country. I mean, the stats are skewed. The media stories are skewed to continue to feed into a historical perspective that other people want to write. But we have the right pencil and pen, and we have the paper. We have the goods. Even though things are bad, we still have the goods. But we're not loud enough because we're not consistently building that legacy to pass on with that mindset and frame of mind.
Gotcha. That's wonderful. Wonderful insight, Coach Marcus, Coach Gillette, and also Mr. Stewart. So, gentlemen, once again, I appreciate both of your insights, both of your opinions, both of the comments, all the comments that you guys made on the topic today. And I would like to say this as as one final note on my end. I'm going to give the opportunity to Mr. Stewart to have a final note as well, and you too, Coach. Folks, I think racism still exists, and I think it's been said on this show that racism will always exist on both parts, on all parts. Anybody, any race, any person can be subjected to racism, and can also have racism towards other people. I don't think the issue is not so much about racism, but how you react to it, how you combat it, and how you, from my opinion, how you live and ultimately how you lead. If you can lead in a way, whether someone is pretty much, I would use the new common term, hating on you, someone, whether it's hating on you for whatever reason, if you lead in a way that's, first of all, uplifting and ultimately to Christ. And this is the thing, no one on this earth is perfect. No one walking around the streets is perfect. But the question that I would say is this: the life that you live, if you can pray and say, if Christ right now was to say to you, why should I let you in my kingdom? And you can ultimately answer that question, then you should, and if you can give good answers and stuff, why he should let you in his kingdom, then you're living a life worth just and worth something that no matter what kind of racism is going on here, you can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Stuart?
And
Stuart, you want to give your last thoughts?
Yes. I grew up with I grew up with all four of my grandparents still alive, and what they were able to share with me is their experiences. And my grandmother in particular was born on a plantation. Even though it was after slavery, the conditions for black people living on plantations continued through to her lifetime. So if you're talking about what she passed on to me in my lifetime, and I'm 55 years old, you're absolutely right. Our freedom has not been there for very long, and we are very young in the understanding of freedom. And I think you make a point when people look at it and forget the fact that freedom is not free. It comes with responsibilities and things that we have to do to ensure that it's maintained and used properly. I wholeheartedly agree that education and understanding are the keys to self-empowerment for us to use that tool.
And there is no stupidity is famous now, to be stupid and to act stupid and to do stupid things, but there is no substitute for behavior that is responsible. There's just no substitute. I mean, we have to man up, woman up wherever we are, respectively, in life at some point. And as Keenan, as you always say on this show, we can't forever use other people's actions, behaviors, as a pattern of self-destruction as a people, or any people, really. And let's not forget that we're not the only people that folks are racist about. This is not an isolated case. Racism is a matter of the heart, not a matter of color.
Very good point. Very good point.
The condition of the heart. So, Keenan, we want people also to weigh in about this topic, how racism has affected them and divided them in some way, shape, or form, right there on the Keenan Lake Show. Keenan, go ahead and give them the contact information so they can be able to weigh in.
Folks, please make sure you give me a call, 828-582-2261. You can also text that number as well if you have any comments. The website, mydaddytaughtmethat.com. Facebook, Keenan Lake. The Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio is another Facebook page. And then finally, My Daddy Taught Me That is the final third Facebook page. And then also on Twitter, at The KL Show. So those are a lot of ways to contact me, a lot of ways to have your voices heard, a lot of ways to weigh in on this show. If you have anything that you want to talk about or any questions that you want to have, we'll make sure that we can kind of get back to you.
And Keenan, we got to say thank you to the last set of guests. I won't say guests, but people that commented on the last show. We want to say thanks to them for listening and weighing in as well.
Exactly. For those who have done that in the past, for all of our followers who listen to the Keenan Lake Show or comment on the show, I greatly appreciate that. It gives me an opportunity to have constructive criticism, and also the feedback is really good for the growth and development of the Keenan Lake Show. So please continue to weigh in. Please continue to support the show. Please continue to allow your voice to be heard about the show. And if there's things that, you may feel controversial about, please, you can inbox me personally. I will not say your name, and not, we don't go about putting you out like that. But all feedback and all opinions are really welcome.
Mm-hmm. And Stuart, thank you so much for coming on the show. Give some contact information, Stuart, in case someone wants to have you speak at their facility or event or program. Give them some contact information real quick.
All right, my name is Lucian Stewart. I can be reached at 828-333-9782. I do work in life coaching, public speaking, and specifically for young people. So by all means, any way I can help, I'm available.
Oh, man, that's a great thing. Thank you so much, Stuart. Very, very good to have you on. Keenan, as always, you're always stirring the pot. You do it so quietly and so subtly. I think the fire marshal has given us a notice here that we've started too many fires in 2014. And investigations are underway as to the source of these fires. You know what I mean?
Well, Coach, you know, we want these things happen, and we want to be able to help the folks out and actually ask the tough questions and be able to give the answers and the insight and also the confidence to go out here and do what was necessary to be done, Coach. But as always, I appreciate you. All the comments, again, thanks to Mr. Lucian Stewart for being on the show, and we'll see you guys on the next show.
All right, guys.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to the Keenan Lake Show right here on SIBN Radio. Until next time, whatever you do, take care of you.
Thank you for joining us today for the Keenan Lake Show. We know you will be empowered as you consider the content shared by Mr. Keenan Lake, co-host Marcus Select, and our guests. For more information about Mr. Keenan Lake, please visit www.mydaddytaughtmethat, and feel free to email us at lake@mydaddytaughtmethat.com. Books can be ordered from Mr. Lake by calling 828-582-2261. Until next time, you've been listening to the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio.